Every leap of civilization was built off the back of a disposable workforce. We lost our stomach for slaves, unless engineered. But I can only make so many.
This scene is from the movie Blade Runner 2049, and it speaks to the fact that throughout human history, we have relied on a strong, reliable, and largely low-skilled workforce as we expanded into the world. The ancient Egyptians had elaborate slave classes who carried out tasks from construction to military service, sometimes for the entirety of their lives. The Romans had slaves who were not only used for basic labor, but were also largely skilled, serving as physicians and accountants. In both examples, these civilizations endured and remained stable, largely due to a reliable and persistent workforce. Now, although we have mostly evolved beyond the point of enslaving each other to build empires, the next stage of human expansion, which is most certainly towards the stars, will require us to create a workforce which is well suited for the rigors of space. Now, before we continue, I'd like you all to know I post new videos on Sundays, so please leave a like if you enjoy this video, and subscribe to the channel if you want to watch more interesting stuff about the future. Some 400 million years ago, just around the time when Earth moved to the habitable zone in our solar system, the first signs of complex life appeared on Earth, and these simple organisms would evolve to become a vast and diverse biome which includes us humans. For now, we continue to thrive, but that won't last forever, as there are many factors which could bring our progress to a screeching halt. A rogue asteroid, a destructive solar event, or a yet unknown universal threat. And even if we don't consider the existential threats, our population will eventually rise to the point where resources will become scarce planet-wide. Bottom line is, the only way we can assure our continued existence for the next 1,000-odd years is by expanding beyond Earth, and this is the main reason why I believe space colonization is not only relevant but also decisive for our species. But as we've discovered, the universe outside our planet is not kind to life or the living. Our closest neighbors, the Moon and Mars, are both extremely hostile to humans and other forms of Earth life. Now, there are obviously a lot of things to consider when building an off-world colony, like money, technology, and materials, but most of these problems already have practical solutions. For example, our current propulsion technology allows us to reach destinations even as far as the asteroid belt within 3 months or less, so the problem of getting there has already been solved. But how do you build a habitat once you get there? Although our propulsion technologies have largely improved over the years, it still takes a lot of resources to send stuff out of Earth's orbit. This makes the idea of constructing a large space habitat here on Earth and sending it to space quite an expensive and impractical affair. At least to invent a far more efficient way of escaping Earth's gravity well, like a space elevator or nuclear fusion-powered rockets. That means the only way we can realistically build one right now is by creating some kind of workforce and sending it to space with the intention of sourcing and refining the materials required to build said habitat there in space. Today, machines like large-scale 3D printers and swarm bots are being developed for space projects, but we are still a long way from building robots which can independently build viable habitats for human use. So, we can't build these habitats on Earth, we can't build them with machines in space, at least not yet. That leaves us with one option: replicants. So what are replicants? From the same movie we spoke about earlier in the video, replicants are bioengineered beings which are very similar to humans, but are genetically altered to be stronger, faster, and more durable than us. Now, there is a reason I chose the term replicants specifically. When building something as complex as an orbital space habitat or a Martian base, one would require intelligent beings capable of on-the-spot problem solving and a high level of functional flexibility. This means a bioengineered chimp or dog wouldn't be exactly useful in such an endeavor. Maybe as pets, but not much else. Point is, the base material for any bioengineered life form will have to be human, since we already possess the necessary genetic foundation like sentience, intelligence, and dexterity. Most of us are already familiar with the basic forms of human enhancement, like anabolic steroids and Ritalin, which tends to sharpen focus. But to enable a human being to survive in space, it will require a complete overhaul of our physical structure. We already know through our astronauts that anything more than a few months in space can lead to bone loss, muscle atrophy, and recently, even eye problems due to the flattening of the eyeballs. This means that simple or superficial changes won't cut it in this case. In our current technological toolbox, the most effective instrument we have to create a being capable of withstanding the harshness of space, aka replicant, is CRISPR-Cas9, which is one of the more reliable gene editing techniques used around the world. You could think of it as a sat-nav guided pair of molecular scissors. It is directed to a specific location in the DNA of an embryo or a full-grown organism and performs a cut and paste function, not unlike what we do with a note-taking app on our phones. Now, like I said, genetic editing can be done on mature organisms as well as embryos, but research has shown that editing the genes of an embryo not only offers more effective results, but is also much safer. This is because even though we are rapidly learning how to master genetic manipulation, we are still basically freshmen in the field. That means there's a lot of hit and miss in terms of results. Imagine if we corrected the sickle cell mutation in the human genome and inadvertently made people more susceptible to malaria. Or we found a way to make ourselves immune to HIV and unexpectedly weakened our immune system permanently. Potential side effects like these are why it is much more reasonable to carry out these experiments on embryos. That way, we can eliminate these effects while perfecting a certain desired trait or genetic function. So what does it all mean? Basically, any replicant we hope to create will be altered at the embryonic phase, and this alteration will continue until the replicant has the desired traits needed to survive in space. Now you're probably asking, what could these traits be which would allow a replicant to survive in space or the Martian surface? Well, required genetic traits will certainly vary depending on where we go in space, but a general set which I feel is the minimum requirement for space exploration would be resistance to cold, resistance to radiation, denser bones, genetic immunity to most common Earth diseases, reduced pain sensitivity, and rapid tissue regeneration. In order to achieve extremely low temperature tolerance in a replicant, we would first need to make sure that their blood remains liquid even at sub-zero temperatures. And this can be achieved by extracting the genes in fish which allow them to produce antifreeze proteins. These AFPs lock onto the ice crystals in the body and stop them growing large enough to damage tissue. The next one is a bit trickier. Radiation is a problem which has frustrated many scientists till date, but I think we already have part of the solution inside our bodies. Melanin is a pigment in our skin which protects us from UV radiation, but recently we found out it can do a lot more. Some researchers believe that melanin might work in the same way as chlorophyll, but unlike the pigment in plants, melanin could convert harmful ionizing radiation into useful metabolic energy and heat. They came up with this theory when they studied plant life which were thriving near the Chernobyl nuclear disaster site. These melanin-rich fungi were found in extraordinarily contaminated and radioactive areas with radiation levels which would kill humans thousands of times over. If the DNA of a replicant were genetically engineered to produce this strain of melanin, it would not only protect him or her from lethal doses of radiation, but also possibly convert that radiation into a form of nourishment. A man was found to have a genetic mutation which was coined LRP5, and it made his bone density 8 times higher than average for a man his age. When further investigations were done on his family, it was discovered that they all possessed this genetic trait, and none of them with ages ranging from 3 to 98 had ever suffered a broken bone in their lives. Should LRP5 be isolated and introduced into the DNA of a replicant, it would mean denser bones which are likely to remain strong during extended trips in space or low-gravity celestial bodies like Mars or the Moon. The endocannabinoid system is one that performs a wide array of homeostatic functions in the human body. The enzyme FAAH, or fatty acid amide hydrolase, is a major contributor within this system, specifically responsible for pain perception, anxiety, and depression. So when a woman was found to have a genetic disorder which caused her FAAH to become non-functioning, doctors noticed she was unable to feel pain, even after numerous major surgeries, and was unable to feel fear or anxiety. Now, although such a mutation might be too extreme to imbue in a replicant, Perhaps we will be able to reduce the effectiveness of this enzyme, thereby giving the replicant a higher tolerance to pain, as well as a resistance to depression and anxiety, which are big issues when you consider how long these people will be in small, cramped living areas out there in space. Finally, the ability to rapidly regenerate tissue can be obtained from the unusual-looking salamander called axolotl, which is capable of regrowing entire limbs within months of losing them. Now, these alterations alone are not good enough to allow a replicant to survive in space for very long. Problems like microgravity and cosmic radiation are still open questions, but this is certainly a good start when you combine them with our pre-existing technologies like radiation shielding and simulated gravity. However, these replicants would suffer far less radiation damage than regular people, would heal from devastating injuries, and would be immune to the coldness of space. Combine these traits with the training they will receive along with cutting-edge technology, and what we have is a very effective workforce capable of constructing an orbital habitat or even a large space on Mars all by itself. It is also important to note that further alterations will be made as we uncover the secrets of simple-celled extremophiles like tardigrades, which have radiation-suppressing proteins that protect their DNA without disrupting normal functions, along with future technologies like synthetic microbes and nanotechnology. At this point, it's kind of obvious that these replicants could eventually stand to replace humanity, as they would continue to enhance themselves genetically, far surpassing the physical and even mental capabilities of any regular person. After generations of genetic manipulation, I can even envision a time when these replicants would possess a flexible genetic structure, or what I refer to as rewritable DNA, which would allow them to easily incorporate exotic genes depending on what planet or region of space they intend to visit. These genetic traits would be stored in a genome library containing DNA taken from billions of organisms they have encountered, not only on Earth but also possibly in space. Currently, if we were to visit a new planet filled with wildlife and vegetation, but instead of oxygen, the atmosphere was sulfur-rich, we would need to build a self-sustaining habitat and wear bulky spacesuits if we plan to stay there for any amount of time. This will not be the case for future humans or replicants, as they would only need to isolate genes from the native wildlife and incorporate the ones which allow them to breathe the planet's atmosphere, thus making it easier for them to thrive on said planet. And if at any point these future humans decided to leave that planet and head back into space, they could extract that unique gene from themselves and safely revert back to breathing oxygen within a few months. Now, it might seem harsh carrying out these experiments on living beings, embryos or not, but similar adaptations already happen in nature every day. Consider the Tibetans, whose bodies require 10% less oxygen due to their high altitude home, or Argentines, who can ingest arsenic, a poisonous substance, without any ill effects. The only difference between this and our artificial system is we are able to control the outcome of our genetic adaptations, thereby allowing us to thrive in new environments. Furthermore, I personally believe we need to begin controlling the path of our evolution, since our current path will only permit us to adapt to Earth and Earth alone. Just like the expansions carried out by our species in the past, our expansion into space will push the limits of our ingenuity and bring greater understanding of not only our universe, but ourselves as well.